Okay, sounds good. Feel free to take it away once you're ready.
Awesome. All right, so everybody, welcome to the D&D Resource Workshop. My name is Apollonaut. I go by Apollo usually. Um, I am the creator and curator of resources for the D&D Compendium website. A lot of the pages on this presentation are going to refer to pages on my website. If you are unfamiliar with it, I will pop it into the chat. We're going to be focusing on Dungeon Master resources today, because that's what I wanted to focus on. Of course, there are tons and tons of resources out there for players as well as learning the game itself. There's a whole page for newbies getting familiar with the system. Today is focusing on Dungeon Masters and online tools for Dungeon Masters to use with their players. These tools can be used for in-person sessions. I have used them in person. However, during this pandemic, I wanted to make sure that Dungeon Masters who are running games online virtually can also have access to tools that are useful for them there. And we'll get to a section at the end where I talk about the differences between running a game in person and online with these tools. Yes, Maple also pointing out that the site is also in the general resources tabs on this Discord server. All right. At any point during this presentation, if you have a question, there is a form posted by Sam up in the special events text channel where you can submit a question with your Discord handle, and I will see those questions as they come in. I will either choose to address the question immediately if I see it that it's relevant to the conversation, or at the end of the workshop, I will address those written questions first. And then after I address those written questions, we will open up microphones, I guess one at a time. People can actually raise their hands to Sam or something, where we'll have kind of an open floor. All right, without further ado, let's get this going. Again, the resources can all be accessed on the D&D Compendium at the DM Resources tab. And I'm going to be showing the specific pages as we go. So the first one I wanted to cover was general DMing tips. Those of you who are coming into the server are likely wanting to learn how to Dungeon Master. And this is one of the pages where I recommend people go first. I've gone and written a whole bunch of my own personal suggestions for people to go see, but here I have some of the main takeaways. First step is learn the rules, right? It's an entire system of rules for combat and roleplay and exploration, all of the main pillars of the RPG genre. Of course, seasoned DMs will start making up their own rules, but it is more beneficial to you as a new DM, and if you have new players especially, that you are familiar with how most of the mechanics work. At the very least, you know where to look for information if you don't have an answer immediately or you don't think you can improvise a solution at the table. It is easier to become a player first, then become a dungeon master. This is because of the sheer amount of information that it is to take in. When you go and look at the basic rules for D&D, it's not the simplest thing, but it is there to serve as kind of a textbook for reference and ideas. The other main tip I have for DMs is run a session 0. So a lot of people are unfamiliar with the concept of a session 0. This is a session that you have before the campaign starts. You meet up with your players, and this is usually where you create characters. And because character creation can take a while if you're not using pre-generated characters, you may end up running out of time anyway before you wanted to run your campaign. So a lot of people have created this format for a session 0 where you cover gameplay expectations. You ask your players, what kind of game do you want to play? Right? Do you want to run a game full of heists, or maybe a game full of just dungeon crawls, or maybe you want to go explore the wilderness, or maybe you want to have it feel like Indiana Jones. You want to address potential problems before they happen and discuss boundaries. This is incredibly important. Some people have things that cause them to become uncomfortable, and it's very helpful to talk about these things before the campaign starts so that everybody's on the same page regarding possible triggering situations or things that could cause discomfort among the players at your table. You want to introduce the setting. Give the player characters a place in the setting. You want to give them a chance to work together and have a reason to be there wherever you're starting the players. You want to introduce house rulings, if you have any, for certain situations. You know, are you running with critical failures and critical successes on ability checks? Because that's not official, right? That's usually a house rule that if you roll a 20 or if you roll a 1, something special happens. So you can make those decisions before the session 0 occurs, and then tell your players during the session 0, and then maybe discuss with them and have them give their reasons why or why not to have those rulings. I will be helping to host another workshop just for this topic. There's a ton more that could be said here, and I've been actually editing the session 0 document, working with a couple other DMs, so that we can have kind of a panel on that later. Another takeaway from the DMing tips page is ask for help. Right, you're not alone here. Dungeon masters have, in the past, right, before the internet existed, the only help they had was the books in front of them, and maybe if they were at a game store, maybe the other DMs at the game store. But in person, if there isn't the internet, you really just got to dig for whatever you need help with, or just come up with it on the fly. But now, if you have a question, you can ask for help and get an answer within minutes. On Discord especially is really great for immediate feedback. Reddit is good for hashing out complex ideas, getting lots of opinions from people. Facebook is also kind of a mixture of that. You can get some good discussions. You can also get really quick feedback. The quality of the feedback sometimes is not very great on Facebook, though. The last piece here is don't write the whole story in advance, right? We are not running a novel with our players. We are creating a story, and they are characters that we cannot control the actions of. We want to prepare non-player characters that exist in the setting. We want to prepare situations that might occur. We want to prepare motivations for the characters that are in our world so that the situations that arise logically make sense based on the motivations. That is what drives plot. Motivation drives plot. So at this moment, if you have any other questions regarding any of this, you can send in a question to the workshop questionnaire, and I will address it later. We're going to move on. Campaign management tools. So as a dungeon master in the digital age, when you are preparing a campaign, you have a lot of work to do. If you are running a official adventure, there might already be resources for you for understanding the setting, understanding the characters and the plots that are all going on in the background. If you're creating your own world, there's a lot that you can think about. And you can ask yourself a lot of questions about the world that you're creating. And through all of this thinking, it's helpful to write down some of your ideas, not all of them. So some people have physical pen and paper. They have notebooks. I have seen dungeon masters from the 1980s, 1990s, filling binders with NPCs and city location information and all kinds of great stuff. Now that we're online, we have a bunch of great campaign management tools that allow us to write down information and cross-link, kind of like a wiki. One of those is Conca. Conca is what I started with. I love it. It is fantastic. It's free to use. If you pay the subscription, it's not very expensive. It allows you to have bigger files, images, and other media that you can put on there. It gives you space for, characters, locations, maps, organizations, families, calendars, timelines, races. All of this stuff you can make custom for your world. It's mobile friendly. So if you have an idea while you're out at dinner, or maybe you're, taking a walk and you have an idea, maybe you just took a shower and your computer isn't on yet and you want to get out and put your idea into your phone, you can do that on here really easily. It's easily cross-referenceable between locations and characters. It's fantastic. So I recommend Conca. A lot of people haven't heard of it. Next one I'm going to recommend is Legend Keeper. This is currently in development. The only way to get access to it is through invite or by supporting the Patreon. So it is kind of behind a little bit of a wall there. But once you get into it, or if you see people using it, it is incredible. The entire basis of the organization system is this map in the background where you can put markers of different colors and shapes, and each marker represents something new. And it has full markdown support for every location, every tag that you put in there. So this is incredibly useful. I am currently in the process of migrating all of my Conca stuff over to Legend Keeper because it is that good. Honorable mentions are World Anvil and Notion. So World Anvil is so feature rich it can be overwhelming. It has room for everything. There's hundreds of different categories that you can fill in. And if you just want inspiration on, what do I think about next for my world, you can go onto World Anvil and see the options that they have provided people to build their worlds. World Anvil is used by novel writers, as well as RPG campaign setting writers and people running their own D&D campaigns. It is one of the kind of giants in the industry. It's very well known for a good reason. It's worth a look. Notion is a page-based system for storing information, whatever that information is. People use Notion for a lot of work-related things, but Notion is also great for combining stuff like Google Drive documents and spreadsheets. It has its own systems for cross-linking and interlinking. There are some templates out there for D&D, but I found that creating your own is often an experience worthy of trying out. That's all I'll say for Notion. It's also worth a look. Moving on, I'm going to take a look at the question responses really quick. We got nothing. So if you have any questions, let me know. Session preparation. This comes up a lot with new dungeon masters. How do I prepare for a session? What do I do? I don't know what my players are going to do, but I want to have them do this, and I want them to go to this location. And maybe I want them to go this direction for some kind of plot. So you can think about all those things, but here are some tools that'll help you with that. D&D Speak is a fantastic website full of D100 tables, 100 lists or 100 item lists, full of so many inspirational things. I can't speak of all of them. Tons and tons of plot hooks and counter tables. Really great stuff. Prophetic dreams that mean nothing, adventuring school superlatives, right? So these are just fun. A lot of them are what has inspired me for some of my own homebrew campaign stuff. 100 mushrooms and their effects, travelers you meet on the road, just ideas for characters. Overall, great website. Eigengrau's Essential Establishment Generator is able to create an entire town on the fly and creates cross-linking between locations and characters and creates descriptions instantaneously. It populates shops with inventories. Restaurants gain menus. There are plot hooks and counters. It is a little bit bug prone. It is all built in JavaScript and HTML. And so there are sometimes issues with the site, but usually a refresh or going back between pages will fix it. There is a Discord where they have bug reports, and the bugs are usually fixed quickly. Another great thing about Eigengrow's Essential Establishment Generator, or EEEGen, is that you can export NPC information directly into Legend Keeper because Legend Keeper is Markdown. Fly Flourish is a content creator who writes weekly articles on his musings about DMing, the resources he finds. He's an inspiration for me. I plan to get his book at some point, The Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. It highlights a lot of useful preparation techniques for DMing. Some other recommendations here are Matthew Colville's Running the Game YouTube series. He was a writer for Turtle Rock, I believe. They made the game Evolve. He runs a whole bunch of D&D campaigns. He's a huge board gamer. He has his own Discord with tens of thousands of people in it. Matthew Mercer, the Dungeon Master for Critical Role, has his own YouTube series called GM Tips. Those are also useful. And of course, Famous Hippopotamus, who is here in this Discord server, has a fantastic series of Reddit posts for preparing your games and for world building. I'm going to watch the questions and see if there's any coming in. Still nothing. All right, I'll continue on. Map making. We find ourselves in the digital age, and running games online means that we usually use tools that allow us to show a map to the players and move the little tokens around on a map. So with that in mind, it helps to have visuals. And a lot of the time, if we cannot find the visual that we want, we have to make it. So Incarnate is one of the most popular and most well-known map-making sites. It is a web-based browser editor for map assets. They have a whole bunch of built-in stuff that is fantastic and easy to use. Drag and drop, and like if you want to create a mountain range, you just click on the mountains and then drag your cursor down, and it'll create a mountain range that looks really good. You can create city and village maps. You can even make battle maps. So if you haven't touched Incarnate in a while, maybe you used it a couple years ago and did your world map with it like I did, you can actually come back to it and make encounter maps, battle maps, interior maps even. It is a bit complex because of the amount of features that it has, but it is incredibly easy to use. So I would say give it a shot. And if it's not what you intend or not what you wanted, there are so many more map making tools out there. One of which is Dungeon Scroll. So if you want to make dungeons with a grid, maybe you want to think about making an isometric map, Dungeon Scroll is great for this. It makes it look hand-drawn. It's great for dungeons, of course, and maps. If you want to import your own assets from your files on your computer, you can overlay those in. It has full color. You can even make it look, cross-hatched up there, fill in the gaps with cross-hatching. If you go to the donjon.bin.sh website, which is also full of generators, you can generate a dungeon and then export it as a TSV file, and you can import it into Dungeon Scroll. That's pretty cool. Okay. Session tools. So after session preparation is all finished, you go into your session and you're wanting to run your story, and you want to access rulings. So you might have the books next to you, but if you don't own the books, the online DM screen is pretty useful. Allows you to search for things, easily navigable and searchable, and you can scroll through it. It has pretty much all of the system reference documentation in there, easy to find. So this kind of speaks for itself. Of course, if you have a whole bunch of bookmarks in your books, that can work too. For spell reference, for the system standard accessible spells, the system reference documentation, the D&D Beyond site has all of these on there. Of course, if you own the player handbook, you can see all of the other spells in there. There are some websites that have all of the spells that exist, from Xanathar's Guide, from the player handbook. But legally, they cannot put all of that content on a website. So I cannot promote them by naming them. I can say they exist. If you want no worry about legality, you can go to D&D Beyond. They have spells, they have equipment, magic items, monsters. Those are all also limited by the SRD. What's also cool about D&D Beyond is that Avray, the Discord bot, can query content from your D&D Beyond account. So if you have purchased the player handbook or the Dungeon Master's Guide on D&D Beyond, you can put Discord bot commands in Discord, and Avray will spit out the information that is from D&D Beyond, which is really useful. Additionally, if you don't know about D&D Beyond, the way that it works is that you can purchase individual races, monsters, items, spells. You can purchase that content individually, and it's like microtransactions, like $1 or 50 cents or whatever. But if you spend the amount equivalent to the book's cost, which I think is $50, it gives you all of the content from the book all at once. It's just like, okay, you've earned the book. Here's the whole book, which is neat, I guess, in its own right. It is not run by Wizards of the Coast. It is a separate company that has all of the licensing from Wizards of the Coast, which is why we don't get D&D Beyond codes by purchasing physical books. Improved initiative. So during a session, you want to run combat. And some or most virtual tabletops will handle initiative their own way. I've found that improved initiative is actually sometimes easier and nicer. It allows you to import the SRD monsters. And if your players have a character sheet that can export a certain file format, it can be imported into improved initiative, and you can have your player characters in this interface as well. You can automatically roll damage. You can automatically roll for health. You can automatically roll for initiative if you want. The players even have their own view pane. You want to show them the player view. And it won't show the health of all of the opponents that they're fighting. The player view only shows the descriptive damage value of the enemy. So it'll say that they're bloodied or they are, incredibly weakened, instead of showing the exact health. Moving on to more in-person, or I guess in-session tools. Sometimes you want to add some extra atmosphere to your game, some extra music. It really helps bring the immersion up a huge level. One of these websites is Bardly, bardly.io. You can create a playlist of songs, atmospheres that can be played in whatever order you want. You can fade between them. And a lot of them are really descriptive and match pretty well with what they describe. So there's over 100 different ones on here so far. It's in development. I made a really quick playlist here. Adventurers planning their next move in the city, and then chasing someone in the city, drinking in a lively tavern, performance in a tavern, and then a tavern brawl. As it might happen. Finary is how to put this in words. It's full. It is huge. It's got gigabytes of sound data on here from the Game Developer Conference. For every year that GDC goes on, they add a huge library of sounds. And so you can search for different tags. They have a whole bunch of different tags here for different kind of scenes. You make a scene full of these sound effects, and you can play them and mix them, increase the volume. You can mute them, you can play them. I just searched jungle here, and I got a really nice combination of jungle sounds that I might play. Tabletop audio. This is pretty great. There's a link on my website for this kind of pre-made sound pad where you can have outside sounds, you can have indoor sounds. You can create a scene at night. Maybe you have some crickets and a campfire making sounds. Or maybe you go into a market and you've got sound of a crowd in a market, and you've got a blacksmith off in the background hitting the anvil. It really makes a lot of difference when you're playing, being able to hear some sounds that might be going on around your players. This is just one of many. This is this sound pad that was created is one of thousands of different sounds you can make. We are approaching the end of the slideshow here. I did include this little section for your players. Sometimes you just want your players to have some resources during the session. One of those is a kind of a cheat sheet. This is a quick ref for them. What can they do on their turn? So they have these 4 categories, movement, action, bonus action, reaction, and it tells them how many they get, 1 per turn here, or 1 per round, 1 per turn. You can tap on something and it'll show you more information. So if you tap on the grapple, it'll tell you more information about grappling on a little window that pops up. And it's also mobile friendly, which is fantastic. Dice Cloud is a character management interface. It's completely customizable, built by default for 5th edition D&D. It is an alternative to D&D Beyond's character manager. Avray also recognizes Dice Cloud character information. So if you're running a game and you're using Discord to import character information, you can either use Dice Cloud or D&D Beyond, either way. And then Avray can help you roll different abilities using Avray commands. You can export Dice Cloud as a printable sheet, just like D&D Beyond. Another thing with this is that it allows you to export directly to Improved Initiative that I mentioned earlier. And I think that's just about it. That is my last slide of my presentation. So again, if you have any questions, I'll go take a look. I've got a question from Maple here. It says, have you encountered any particularly good ways of linking the players to the story? Do I give a questionnaire? So this is probably session 0. Back to session 0 stuff. I'll just go have a thing here, don't I? Slide. Dming tips, I guess. 0. So linking the players to the story. Do I have a questionnaire? Do I have the players talk to each other? Yeah, of course. So during the session 0, you want the players to talk to each other and figure out where they belong in the setting that you've created, or the setting that you have on hand from a book, perhaps. Sam is saying, if anybody wants their mic opened up to ask a question or make a comment, let them know in the chat there. There are some questionnaires out there. There's one, I guess I can open it up here. I'll show you. In the DMing tips page, under the session 0 information here, I can share. Session 0 checklist. There's a handout here. So the session 0 handout talks about the different types of players. And so I'm going to be going over this in the session 0 workshop. But you have like these different archetypes of how people like to play games. And they can actually label themselves as to what they prefer. And you can get to know your players more, as well as their preference for how deadly they want the adventure, whether you want really gritty, hardcore like resource management. Do you want to go and recover all of your arrows after you fire them, or do you want to just assume that you pick them back up? Are you keeping track of water and food every day? Also, if your players are going to be instigating fights between the other characters, how do you want that handled? All of this other stuff. That's going to be later on during that session 0 workshop. linking the players to the story. That is a nuanced question that I believe would be a great discussion with other dungeon masters during the Session Zero panel. Finding a location for the players to start in, and then finding a reason for those players to be there and a reason for them to work together has an entire workshop built around that set of questions. I have here a Session Zero checklist, which is for the dungeon master to consider. You don't necessarily have to cover all of these, but you usually decide, how is experience handled, expectations for gameplay, disruptive topics, unannounced dice rolls, min-maxing. How do you feel about players power gaming? What is your dungeon master style? Well, you might not know if you've never DM'd before. Do you have any concerns about ethics? Character creation, are there any limitations? Races and classes, game style, character lifestyle, backgrounds, feats, mounts, general mechanics rules, inspiration, right? These are all things to consider. How do you handle criticals? It's a good read. I don't want you to be overwhelmed if this is all new to you. I recommend reading through it and thinking, like, knowing that it exists is the first step, but Sam has a lot of good stuff regarding your first DMing session, and it's best not to overwhelm yourself before you get started. And I know a lot of the stuff that I have can be very overwhelming.
Hey, Apollonat, we've got a question from Juice if you want to take one next from him.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to unmute him and he's going to ask his question.
Yeah, go for it.
Or I shouldn't assume he's a he. He or she, they. Juice. Oh. Let's see here. Okay. Of course it's not working now, even though it just worked a second ago.
Juice, try leaving and rejoining the channel.
Oh, there we go. That might have worked. Nope. Man, it literally just worked with Maple. Let's see here. Let me give him a roll and let's see if that works. Juice, sorry, try one more time to leave the channel and come back in. Shoot.
You can type it as well.
Yeah, Juice, if you want to type it out. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what happened. It was working a second ago, and we tried it with Maple, and now I can't get it to unmute you.
What resources I use myself, both as a DM and a player. So I personally, my virtual tabletop of choice right now is Tableplop. I have yet to try Astral. I've heard good things. I know Sam uses it, and I've heard good things about Foundry. Roll20 right now is in kind of a tumultuous state in the RPG community. There was a scandal about a year ago. It's also just being Tableplop. Roll20 does a lot of things well. But I found that the things that it does well can be found better done in other VTTs. It's worth a look. I have an entire I'm sharing my screen still. I have an entire page on my site for virtual tabletops. There's little introductory videos for each one. I want to take a little window shopping on it. Other tools that I use personally when I'm DMing digitally, there's There's a website that I can't mention, actually, that I use for reference. So I could probably private message it, but I can't say it publicly because it has everything from the Wizards IP. But if I didn't have that website, I would use D&D Beyond. I would use D&D Beyond, and I would use the Improved Initiative on here. I usually keep track of initiative using the virtual tabletops built-in thing. But I'm wanting to try Improved Initiative. For campaign management, I said again, I use Conca and Legend Keeper. I'm in the process of transferring everything over. Is there any particular resource that you're curious about that I might use?
And Juice, actually, if you want to try one more time, make sure you're on your end, your mic is not muted, and it might actually work. There we go. I think that might have been.
Now
It
you
was
talk.
mine this whole time. That's embarrassing.
That's okay.
Yeah, but also things like for world building and inspiration, and like what resources. I guess you already mentioned it mostly, but what do you like keep ready when you're DMing or when you're prepping for a session?
Okay, so for a session prep, world inspiration, a lot of it comes from D&D Speak and Famous Hippo. So Famous Hippo's in this Discord, also with this kind of dark red DM tag. He's not currently online at the moment, but he has a whole series of posts on Reddit talking about how do you build a city? How do you build a faction? How do you build like a rogues guild? How do you handle different forms of government in your fantasy world? Lots of things to think about when you're creating your world. I just kind of free-formed wrote a bunch of things out in Google Docs before I learned about Conca. And so I've slowly been migrating from Google Docs to Conca, and then the stuff that I haven't brought over to Conca already is going straight to Legend Keeper. I'm not ready to show that publicly at the moment because it's kind of a mess. I don't have that much in there. For inspiration, I guess I can show you here if I'm sharing my screen at the moment. In my world building section, there's the complete hippo. Hopefully, the 2020 update. He now has a formatted PDF you can get on itch.io. He's just got hundreds of plot hooks, lots of campaign seeds. See Hype's question in a second here. Counters, mechanics, monsters, NPCs, resources, tablecraft, treasure, world building. Right, here we go. Let's build a city. Talks about druids, enclaves, religions. There's a whole thing about rogues. All of his campaign stuff. It's awesome. What do I turn to for meeting other players and DMs either in the physical world or digitally, Hype Knight says. For meeting other players and DMs, Discord is great. Haven't had any issue finding groups, and if I ever wanted to start a group or run a one-shot or do playtesting, Discord, there are hundreds of Discords. If you look on the Discord communities section of my website, or communities Discord servers, there's over 250 listed. There are so many. And if you look on here, there's active games. All these D&D Discord servers tagged with active games with thousands of people in them. Most of these invites should be active. Some of them are inactive. But if you want to go find a group, these Discord servers are a great place to start. There's also the LFG page. So these are all services that you can look on for finding games as well. You can hire dungeon masters on Fiverr. There's Reddit. There's Guild. Startplaying.games. Find a game, find a GM. Browse games. We've got all these hosted games that are going on. There's a sitemap on my website. If you want to just like scroll through what I have on there, I've lost count at this point. I'm assuming it's probably around 1,000 links to things, and I've categorized as much as I could. Something that I get comments on frequently is the order of how I list things on my site. For example, in the Maps and Map Tools page, it's not alphabetically, which confuses some people. The order that I've put things on the site usually has to do with my personal recommendation level. The top 3 or top 5 are usually the ones that I would recommend going to. And all of the other ones on here are worth a look. So if you don't find what you're looking for in the top 5, it's like going to the second page of Google, right? You go on and you go, hey, there's these other ones. Maybe those have what I need. Physical DMing isn't happening right now because of the pandemic. I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we are struggling to have businesses opening up. The local game stores are struggling. But before, for finding games in person, there's always Adventurers League. Lots of game stores find that they can get certified or allowed by Wizards of the Coast to host or kind of sanctioned, organized play for D&D. It is a special format where your character levels up once every session, and there are different tiers of play, and every session is a kind of pre-written one-shot. And you can take your character and bring that character across the country and join another table at a game store. It's still legal for play, which is really cool. You can have one character that you have on all different kinds of adventures at different game stores even, but you have an ID number for your character that allows them to track all of their progress. You can even trade magic items between people online, as long as it's of the same tier. All right.
Cool. Did anyone else have any last minute questions here? Just if you want me to open up your mic, just post a quick message. Otherwise, yeah, if there's nothing else, I think we're all set. Oh, zero none. Okay.
Verona wants to.
Okay, your mic's open.
Well, first thing, if you don't mind, ApollonautRPG, I would like the link to that website you mentioned that you're not allowed to mention, that we totally didn't just mention.
I saw that.
And secondly, I wonder how you handle in-game, because I know how to handle improv, but do you have a special thing for when do you have something in particular for when the game goes totally off the rails and your players just teleported to the other side of the world? Or anything similar?
Off the rails and what again?
Like, if the players go totally off the rails, you have nothing prepared, and you're struggling to improv, do you have any tips for that? Because that's something that has happened to me multiple times.
Yes. Absolutely. So a lot of session preparation, the way that I treat it, is less about preparing a story and less about the rails. Because I find that the players will never do what you expect them to do. Even if you expect them to do 10 different things, they will find an 11th. Guarantee it. And part of this is is handled by Sly Flourish in the Return of the Lazy Dungeon Master. But the main takeaway from all of the suggestions that I see a lot is changing your mindset of how you prepare, and when you are running the session, when the players kind of go off the rails, so to speak, off of anything that you've prepared, they've gone a completely different direction. Maybe you prepared a pathway to a cave in the mountains today, and they are like, we're going to go hire a boat and go across the ocean. Well, okay, what's out there? So all of this is supported by world building. You build your world in such a way that you can and think of something that logically exists and would logically happen in your world wherever the players are. Say they go and they want to talk to somebody who might know something about some area of expertise. Want to search for an expert on gems, for example. You think, okay, this city that they're in, is it anywhere near a place that might produce gems? Is there a gem crafter or maybe a jewelry maker here that might know about this information? And if it logically would make sense, then you can say, yes, they exist. And as soon as they exist, you have to give them a name. And this is where random name tables help a lot. You just print out a list of names and you can grab one. You give them a name, and then you give them a personality, and sometimes you even give them a voice. So there's a lot of tips regarding all of those. As soon as the players request something, there are tools out there to help you spawn that thing in your world, even if they didn't exist. If it would logically exist, you say it does exist. You must create it. I've had to sometimes in my sessions take a pause, like, all right, so you're going to go find this thing or this person. All right, give me a second to make this character. Of course, that like pulls back the veil of the dungeon master knowing everything. But it really gives you a chance to think about, how am I going to play this character? What personality am I going to give them? What information do they know? What logically makes sense for the world? So the main point here I'm making is the world building supports the improv. That's it. If your world has enough foundation in it, in the lore, in the locations, in the characters that are there, you know the motivations of the important characters, then you can logically spawn things that exist in your world as the players move through it.
Okay, so
Last question here from Varza.
so anyway, just
I'll
mainly
get a
your
follow
tip
up in a
would
second.
be to in less session prep and more world building in order to be able to anticipate the player's decisions unknowingly, just by having an organized world that can react to the players without having to plan everything out.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head there. You're building a world, and the more you know about your own world, the easier it is to create things that would logically exist there.
Yeah. Well, I think I might have a look at that. Was the Kanker? Is that the one?
Yeah.
I think I might have a look because
Okay.
until now I've been pen and paper, and as much as I like that, it's hard to organize.
Right. Google Drive is sometimes sufficient, or just files or a notebook. Conca is pretty great. Where were we? Varza submitted a question. Would you elaborate on the differences between running games in person? Yes, I did say I was going to talk about this. The differences between running games in person versus online virtual. Which do you prefer and why? I prefer to run in person. I started in person, and I guess the differences here. The main difference between running online and in person is that the human interactions, being physically within feet of each other and being able to see the facial reactions and the more visceral responses to things, being able to stand up over the table with this incredibly tense moment and then high five each other when the party wins this improbable encounter. That's got its own energy to it that you don't really get on virtual games as much. It's possible. It's just its own kind of special magic to it. Virtual games can sometimes be easier to make things happen faster. For example, if a player knows they have an ability, they can just like double click on the ability and it'll pop up in the chat that they're using it. Or if they want to roll perception, they just click on perception on their character sheet and it'll pop up in the chat. Or to roll the dice for them instantaneously. It'll do all the addition and modifications and all of that. Players aren't really doing the math in their heads. It allows the game to go a little bit faster, especially for combat sometimes. Not rolling physical dice on a virtual game, as at a table you would be. And, you know, people get to show off their dice collections and, you know, scream about the dice rolling off the table or not. For me, I prefer in-person games. That said, I have recently been enjoying some virtual games with people that I've never met in person. People around the country that I've made friends with. People who speak different languages. Learning more about other people and just connecting on more of a global cultural standpoint. Finding common ground with people that you've never met is really kind of a cool thing. And D&D is a great way to bring that out between people. So they both have their ups and downs. I mean, you don't have to smell the body odor of all the people next to you if you're playing virtually. I think that kind of gets put aside. You know, people take care of themselves. Something interesting that I noted at the kind of the middle of the pandemic is that a lot of people who've been introduced to the game during the pandemic have been playing online only and may not have ever seen a real table of people playing D&D, which means that the concept of like using miniatures or, you know, like a mat that you have dry erase on, or maybe you have even a DM screen. Like, what is a DM screen? What is it used for? These are all kind of relics of the in-person age of D&D, where, you know, people would sit around a table. Like, if you look at Stranger Things, those kids are sitting around a table moving miniatures around, and there's a cardboard screen up on the table, and there's the one kid sitting behind it. That's what in-person D&D can be. DM screen has a bunch of information about quick reference rules. It's not just to hide your dice rolls as a dungeon master. There's a whole bunch of different opinions on whether you should hide your dice rolls or keep them open. That's a whole separate topic of discussion. I have all of my own opinions, and I'm eventually going to be writing a whole blog with some of my own opinions, so I'll get out there eventually. Varza washes the stink off on the regular. Good for you, Varza. Taking care of yourself during a pandemic. Definitely very important. You just picked up the game, yeah. So in person, yes, I used a tablet and a laptop sometimes. The tablet is used for opening pictures of monsters and showing them to the players sometimes. Although I do have the physical books, so I could just turn to the page and show them the book. The tablet is also useful for quick reference. I would open that quick reference page that I showed you for the players. Player guides, cheat sheets, players actions, quick ref. I had this open on a tablet sometimes for quick reference. The laptop would allow me to reference the world that I had created on whether that was Google Documents or Conca at the time. I would use pen and paper to track initiative and health values. I would say, okay, there's 8 goblins. I would write down all of the goblins' health values, and then I would do the manual subtraction myself on the paper. Some people use what's called a boogie board. Electronic writing tablet allows you to write whatever you want, and then you can erase it. I have like a little whiteboard that doesn't use any ink. These are really neat for in-person D&D. One of my other DMs uses one. I don't own one currently. Maple. Okay. Any other text here? Oh yeah, the boogie board is pretty great. In-person D&D. I have a whole box of miniatures that is currently buried on a shelf. Something else that I really enjoyed using was the combat tier lifters, combat risers. So these lift up the miniatures on the table and allow you to have flying creatures. Any final questions coming in?
Cool. Yeah, let's just see if anyone jumps in. Oh, Jinx is typing something.
Sure.
Yeah, those risers are pretty cool.
Yeah. You spice up the story when things hit a little. That's I feel like that's another workshop. How do you spice up the story when things hit a lull? You make things happen. If the players aren't doing something, you make something happen. You know, maybe they're chilling in the tavern in the middle of the day. Suddenly, somebody bursts through the door, says, "Killed the mayor!" You know, suddenly there's action. Throw an explosion at them. Works every time. Sure. What would you recommend for learning the rules? So if you're completely brand new to D&D, yes, Varza linked it there. I was about to link it. There's the Newbie Guides page on my site. There's also, I believe Sam has his own newbie page. And we kind of cross-link to each other. And I have my own guide for getting started. There's a lot here to go through. You know, like what is the game? There's a couple articles you should read and a couple videos you should watch. Kind of get a feel for it. I have recommended starter materials and the core mechanic of the game explained. We have character sheet information, mechanics. Want to know about all the skills? You know, you can see how different skills can be used. There's some advice here. This is a great page to start with. I don't have Sam's link handy at the moment. There's a DMing tips page that is great for DMs getting started. It says if you know nothing about D&D, you know, read the Newbie Guides page. If you've played before but not been a DM, you can do this. Any effort you put into running a game for a group of players is appreciated by those players. Try running a small published adventure first. Or try making your own. You know, pick a plot hook. I've got thousands of plot hooks you can pick from. Grab one and then, you know, let your imagination run. For rules reference, I got a question there. The basic rules are accessible on D&D Beyond. There's also on here the system reference page. There's the D&D Beyond basic rules. It's a little bit easier to digest than the PDF that's put out by Wizards. It's easier to find stuff. Learn how to make a character. Learn about the different classes and races and the stuff that's available to your players so you understand what players can do. After you understand what players can do, you start looking at some things that the creatures in the world can do. Look at the monster manual. Look at some of the creatures. You know, what are they able to do on a turn? What are the abilities? What are spells? How do spells work? Spell casting. You build an encounter, and that's a whole other session. I think a lot of these are introduced by Sam during his newbie sessions. So if you sign up for a slot in the newbie sessions spreadsheet, he has somewhere on here, upcoming events, perhaps.
Yeah, usually the games and the trainings are all in there.
Yeah. So he does excellent training sessions. I've looked through the documentation for them. It seems pretty comprehensive, and you get a chance to test things out in the round robins. Let's see, what are these other questions? Shameless promotion, yes, but it's free.
Cool.
Absolutely. Glad to be here, glad to help. I'm always around. Recommend looking through my website if you ever want inspiration or need resources. There are like 1,000 of them on here. You know, how to DM for kids. If you want to run a game for your own family, you might not want to introduce the entire system of 5th edition D&D to your kids. Maybe you want simplified character sheets, or maybe you might want to choose a different system entirely, or simplify mechanics of the game down to what do you want to do, and then how do we do that? Let their imagination take over instead of the dice. Oh, personally, I have one more thing that I like to mention. Character sheets, like on the topic. Oh, very nice. Yeah. On the subject of character sheets, one of the kind of saviors of my in-person games has been class-specific IV character sheets. These are amazing. I have a whole folder here really quickly. D&D character sheets. Let's see here. So I like playing clerics, and I'll pull up a Tempest cleric here really quick. On this character sheet, we have all of the ability scores, and all of our abilities that are here right next to the relevant stat. So your wisdom abilities are next to wisdom instead of having all of your abilities be alphabetical. And it has all of your class features on the front page. So as you level up, you can change the numbers on here and see what you've got. Your class abilities. This has been indispensable for person games, having class-specific sheets. I have them linked on here as well.
Cool. Well, I don't see any other questions. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thanks ApollonautRPG for doing this. We really appreciate it. It was a great presentation. Remember the website is dnd-compendium.com. It's in the Discord in I think a couple spots. It's on the website, on the main website, linking to it. So you should be able to find it pretty easily. If you're watching this on YouTube later, it will be in the description, video description below, so you can check it out. Otherwise, yeah, thanks everyone for watching, for joining the Discord and asking questions and stuff like that. Really appreciate it. It was a good turnout.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people in here.
Yeah, it's awesome. Otherwise, I think we're all good, right?
Yeah. If you are wanting to contribute a resource, maybe you search through here and you haven't found it, you think it's worthy of visibility on this website, submit it on the contribute page. There's a form to send it in. And I would promote myself for, if you want to buy me a coffee or support on the Patreon. I would say, however, today, because it is Extra Life today, don't send me money today. Send the money to Extra Life if you want to send money somewhere to a good cause. That's it for me.
Cool. All right, well, thanks, ApollonautRPG. Thanks, everyone. And I guess if everyone wants to just stick around too, you're welcome to hop in the tavern or anything, and we can continue to talk or whatever. But otherwise, I think that takes us to the end. So thanks, and see you guys next time.
Take care. Thanks all.